I've reviewed hundreds of hours of pier footage, but I've never seen every camera point the same direction at once. Not sequentially, not because of a tracking algorithm or a programmed sweep. I mean 31 independent camera systems. Ride cams, security feeds, maintenance monitors, that little weatherproof GoPro zip-tied to the bait shop awning. All of them within a 4-second window, reorienting to face the same compass bearing, south-southwest. Toward the water, past the water, towards something beyond the breakline that I have never been able to identify in a single frame. That happened on October 14th, a Tuesday. Overcast, 61 degrees. Wind out of the northwest at 9 miles per hour. The pier was at roughly 40% visitor capacity, which for a Tuesday in mid-October is actually a little high. There was a school group. I'll get to the school group. My name is Audra Wen, and I'm not a journalist. I'm not an investigator. I have no credentials that entitle me to any of the footage I've seen. And if you ask the city of Santa Monica or Pacific Park Management whether I should have access to any of it, they would say no, and they would be correct. What I am is the older sister of a 17-year-old girl who was on the pier that day and who came home and did not speak for 11 hours. Not wouldn't, didn't. She opened her mouth twice during that period. No sound came out either time. She wasn't injured. She wasn't in shock. Not clinical shock anyway. She had no memory of being told to leave the pier. She had no memory of leaving. She remembers standing in line for the Pacific Wheel with her AP Environmental Science class, and she remembers sitting in my mother's car in our driveway in Culver City, and between those 2 points, there is nothing. That's not why I started looking into this. Plenty of people have stress gaps. Plenty of teenagers disassociate during confusing situations. What made me start asking questions was what happened the following morning when Lily sat down at the kitchen table, picked up a pencil, and drew with her left hand. And Lily is right-handed. A detailed, anatomically precise rendering of a radial structure I have since been unable to match to any known marine organism, terrestrial organism, or geometric convention. It took her 90 seconds. She didn't look at the paper while she drew it. She was looking at me. She has not drawn it again. She does not remember drawing it. The paper is in a fire safe in my apartment in Echo Park, and I have photographed it, scanned it, and sent it to 4 people, only 2 of whom responded. But I'm getting ahead of myself. The evacuation of Santa Monica Pier on October 14th lasted 11 minutes. That is not disputed. What is disputed, or more accurately, what has never been formally reconciled, is why it happened. The official cause listed in the Los Angeles County Fire Department incident log is precautionary response to structural vibration sensor activation. That language maps to a real protocol. The pier has vibration sensors embedded in its substructure, installed after the 1994 Northridge earthquake revealed stress fractures in several of the older pilings. If enough sensors trigger simultaneously, the system generates an automatic advisory to LAFD Station 71, which sits less than a quarter-mile east on the beach. Station 71 has a standing pier evacuation protocol. It's a real thing. It has been activated before. Twice in 2019, once during a storm surge event in 2023. So on its face, the October 14th evacuation is unremarkable. Sensors trigger, protocol activates, visitors are moved off the pier, engineers inspect the substructure, pier reopens. That's the story. That's the incident log. If you weren't there, you'd have no reason to think otherwise. I wasn't there, but Lily was, and so were roughly 1,100 other people, including a school group of 32 students and 3 chaperones from Westchester Enrichment Academy, a family of 5 from Toulouse who had been in California for less than 40 hours, an off-duty paramedic named Glenn Mata, who I've since spoken with at length, and a Pacific Park ride operator named Claudine Reyes, who I have not been able to speak with because she no longer works at Pacific Park, and her phone number has been disconnected, and her LinkedIn profile was deleted sometime in November. I want to be careful here. I'm not building a conspiracy, I'm not constructing a theory. What I'm doing is describing a sequence of things that happened, and then describing what I found when I tried to understand them, and then telling you where my understanding stops. Because it does stop. Clearly, in a place that I find difficult to sit with. I got the first piece of footage 3 weeks after the evacuation. A friend of a friend. I won't be more specific. Works in IT support for a vendor that services the point-of-sale systems at several Pier businesses. This person does not have access to ride cameras or security feeds, but in the course of routine system maintenance, they had occasion to review timestamp-synced transaction logs from October 14th, and they noticed something that bothered them. At 2:07:41 p.m., every active POS terminal on the pier, 14 of them, recorded a simultaneous transaction void, not a timeout, not a power interruption, a void. Each terminal independently registered a completed transaction, and then, in the same clock second, reversed it. The void codes were all different. Some were tagged as customer cancellations, some as inventory errors. One was flagged as a duplicate charge correction, but they all happened in the same second, across vendors that share no common payment processor. That's strange, but it's the kind of strange that gets lost in data. Nobody reviews POS void logs for temporal coincidences. My contact only noticed because they were troubleshooting an unrelated card reader malfunction, and the void cluster showed up as an anomaly in the diagnostic output. I asked them what happened at 2:07 on October 14th. They didn't know, so I looked. The LAFD incident log timestamps the vibration sensor activation at 2:11 p.m. The evacuation order reached the pier at 2:14. The pier was cleared by 2:22. It reopened at 2:25. So the POS voids happened 4 minutes before the sensors triggered. That gap is the reason I'm sitting here talking to you now. Let me describe the footage because I know that's what the title promises, and I want to be honest about what it shows and what it doesn't. I do not have the security camera feeds. Those are controlled by the city of Santa Monica and by Pacific Park's private security contractor, and I have made no attempt to access them because I don't want to go to jail and I don't want to compromise what I believe is a legitimate ongoing question about what happened that day. What I have are ride camera captures, the automated photo systems on 3 rides, the Pacific Wheel, the Pacific Plunge Drop Tower, and the Santa Monica West Coaster. These cameras take timed photographs of riders during peak moments. The top of the Ferris wheel rotation, the drop moment, the first turn. The photos are available for purchase at kiosks or via QR code, and they're stored on a local server for 72 hours before deletion. What I have are screen captures from 5 of those photos taken by 3 different people on 3 different rides within the window of 2:06 to 2:09 p.m. I obtained them the way you'd expect, by asking people who were there if they'd bought or screenshotted their ride photos. It took weeks. Most people hadn't. Most people I contacted through the Westchester Enrichment Academy parent Facebook group either didn't respond or told me, politely, that their kids didn't want to talk about that day. I understand that. I respect it. But 5 people had screenshots, and 3 of them shared them with me. And one of those 3 is Glenn Mata, the off-duty paramedic, who took a screen capture of his Pacific Wheel photo at 2:08 p.m. because, in his words, I wanted to see why my wife was making that face. Here is what the ride photos show. In all 5 images, the background is visible. These are outdoor rides. The cameras are positioned to capture the rider against the sky or the pier, and depending on the angle and rotation, you can see the ocean behind them. In every image taken between 2:06 and 2:09 p.m., the ocean surface in the background is wrong. I don't mean rough. I don't mean discolored. I mean geometrically wrong. Glenn Mata described it before I ever showed him anyone else's photo. He said, "It looked like the water had corners." I asked him to clarify. He said the surface of the ocean in the near distance, maybe 300 yards offshore, appeared to contain a region where the wave pattern was not curving. Where it was, and he used this word unprompted, folding, like a sheet being creased. He said he didn't notice it during the ride. He only saw it in the photo, later, on his phone, when he zoomed in to look at his wife's expression. I have looked at these 5 images more carefully than I have looked at anything in my life. I've adjusted brightness, contrast, white balance. I've had 2 of them examined by a friend who does photo forensics for an insurance litigation firm. She said the images are not manipulated. She also said, and I'm quoting her email, "I don't know what I'm looking at in the water, but it's not compression artifacting, and it's not lens distortion. It has structure. It has structure." I want to sit with that sentence for a moment. In the weeks after I obtained the photos, I became, I don't want to say obsessed, because that word is doing a lot of work, and I think it lets people dismiss what I found. I became focused. I took time off from my job. I work in accounts receivable for a medical device distributor, which is as boring as it sounds, and my manager was understanding when I said I needed personal time. I don't think she'd be understanding now. That was 5 months ago, and I have not gone back. What I did during that time was try to find other people who were on the pier and who saw something. Not in photos, in person, with their eyes. This is where things get complicated, because what I found is not a clean, consistent body of testimony. It is a mess. It is contradictory and confusing, and in several cases, I believe the people I spoke with were not telling me the truth, though I couldn't always tell whether they were lying to me or to themselves. Here's what I can say with confidence. Of the 19 people I was able to interview, in person, by phone, or by video call, who were on the pier between 2 and 2:14 p.m. on October 14th, 14 reported no unusual visual experience at all. They remembered the evacuation. Some were annoyed, some were confused. A few didn't realize it was an evacuation until they were already off the pier and saw the fire trucks. None of these 14 people saw anything in the water. None of them felt anything unusual. Several of them told me, with evident sincerity, that it was one of the least interesting days of their lives. That's important. I want you to hold that. 14 out of 19 people experienced nothing. The other 5 are the reason I'm still doing this. Glenn Mata was the easiest to talk to. He's 53, he's been a paramedic for 22 years, and he has the calm, structured way of describing events that people in emergency medicine tend to develop. He and his wife Deborah were on the Pacific Wheel at approximately 2:07 p.m. He described the ride as normal until their gondola reached the 11 o'clock position near the top, on the ocean-facing side. At that point, Deborah grabbed his forearm hard enough to leave a bruise. He looked where she was looking. He told me, there was something in the water that was the wrong shape, not a shape in the water. The water itself was the wrong shape, like it had a crease in it, like someone folded a piece of the ocean and didn't smooth it back out. It lasted maybe 2 or 3 seconds, and then the gondola rotated and I couldn't see it anymore. And when we came back around, it was gone. I asked if he could estimate the size of the area. He said no. I asked if it was close to the pier or further out. He said it was hard to tell because the geometry of it. And this is him talking, not me, broke my depth perception. I couldn't tell if it was 300 feet away and small or a mile away and enormous. I asked what Deborah saw. He said she won't discuss it. Not with me, not with a therapist they briefly visited in November. She has told Glenn, once, that what she saw was not the same as what he saw. She has not elaborated. I asked Glenn if he reported what he saw to anyone. He said he mentioned it to a Pacific Park employee during the evacuation, a young woman in a red staff shirt who was directing people toward the parking lot. He said the employee listened, nodded, and said, "Yeah, a few people saw something. Don't worry about it. The engineers are checking the pilings." He said the employee's response struck him as strange because he hadn't said anything about the pilings. The second witness I'll describe is a woman named Ana Garza. Ana is 39. She was on the pier alone. She's a freelance photographer. She shoots real estate interiors, mostly. And she was on the pier that day because she'd been hired to photograph a restaurant space on the east end of the pier that was being listed for lease. She finished the job around 1:45 and decided to walk to the west end and take some personal shots of the ocean. Ana did not see anything unusual in the water. What she saw was on the pier. At approximately 2:08, she was standing near the railing on the south side, looking out at the ocean, when she became aware that the ambient noise level on the pier had changed. She said it didn't get quieter or louder. It got. And she struggled with this. Organized. She said the crowd noise, the ride noise, the seagulls, the mechanical sounds of the pier. All of it seemed to momentarily synchronize into a single rhythm. She said it lasted maybe 5 seconds. She said it felt like the pier itself took a breath. Then she looked down at her camera. She'd been holding it at her side, not shooting, but when she looked at the display, it showed a live image, not the standby screen, the live viewfinder, and it was pointed at the deck planking at her feet. On the display, the planking looked normal, except that between two of the boards, in the half-inch gap where you can see the water below, something was looking up at her. She told me this in a coffee shop in Silver Lake 5 weeks after the event. She was composed. She was not performing. She said, "I don't mean I saw an eye. I don't mean I saw a face. I mean the gap between the boards had attention. It was paying attention to me, and I could see that through my camera in a way I could not see it with my eyes." She looked up from the camera, looked down at the gap with her own eyes, saw nothing but ocean surface 15 feet below, visible through the planking, looked back at the camera display. The attention was gone. She left the pier before the evacuation started. She was in her car by 2:10. She told no one. She told me because I found her through a pier photography permit database. The city publishes them as public records, and I sent her a very carefully worded email that did not mention anything about the water, or the evacuation, or the cameras. I simply asked if she'd noticed anything unusual on the pier on October 14th. She responded within 11 minutes. The third and fourth witnesses are together. Marcus and Elena Ashby, both 26, married, visiting from Sacramento. They were waiting in line for the West Coaster at approximately 2:06 p.m. Their account is the one I find most difficult. Marcus told me that while standing in the queue, he looked over at Elena and didn't recognize her. Not in the way where you glance at someone and your brain takes a half second to catch up. He said that for a period of approximately 10 to 15 seconds, the woman standing next to him, holding his hand, wearing clothes he'd watched her put on that morning, was a complete stranger. He could see her features clearly. He could feel her hand in his. But the recognition, the part of his brain that connects a face to a person, was simply not there. He described it as looking at a very detailed photograph of someone he'd never met. And then it came back. All at once, like a circuit re-engaging, and Elena was Elena again, and she was looking at him with an expression he said he will never forget, because she told him, later that night, that she had experienced the exact same thing at the exact same time. She had looked at him and seen a stranger. They did not ride the West Coaster. They left the line. They were walking toward the pier entrance when the evacuation started. They have not been back to the pier. Marcus told me that the experience lasted 15 seconds at most, but that it cracked something in how he understands his own perception. He said, "I always thought recognition was automatic, like breathing. Now I know it's not. It's a signal, and that day, for 15 seconds, the signal was interrupted. I asked both of them if they saw anything in the water. Marcus said no. Elena hesitated. She said she'd seen something she couldn't describe, and then asked me not to ask her about it again. I didn't. The fifth witness is the one I'm going to spend the most time on, because his experience is different in kind from the others, and because he is the person who eventually gave me access to the ride camera footage I referenced at the beginning. His name is Tomas Herrera. He's 61. He's a retired electrical engineer who spent most of his career working on control systems for amusement rides. Not at Pacific Park. He was based in the Bay Area and worked primarily with parks in Northern California and the Pacific Northwest. But he knows ride systems. He knows camera systems. He knows sensor arrays and timing circuits, and the way automated systems interact with each other in shared environments. Tomas was on the pier on October 14th because he goes to the pier every Tuesday. He has done this since his wife Marguerite died in 2021. They used to go together on weekends. After she died, he started going alone, on weekdays, because the weekend crowds were too much without her. He doesn't ride the rides. He walks to the end of the pier, sits on the bench near the bait shop, eats a sandwich, and watches the water for about an hour. Then he goes home. On October 14th, he arrived at approximately 1:30 p.m. He walked to his usual bench. He ate his sandwich. He was watching the water. At 2:06 p.m., and he is precise about this because he checked his watch when it started, the ocean surface approximately 200 yards south-southwest of the pier began to exhibit what he described, in exact engineering language, as a standing waveform inconsistent with ambient sea state conditions. I asked him to translate. He said, "The ocean stopped behaving like a fluid, a section of it, maybe 40 meters across, started behaving like a membrane under tension. The wave pattern within that section wasn't propagating, it was oscillating in place, like a drumhead." He watched this for approximately 90 seconds. Then the area expanded, not gradually. It doubled in diameter in what he estimated was less than 1 second. The boundary of the affected region moved outward in all directions simultaneously, as though a circle had been redrawn at a larger scale. At that point, Tomas said, the pier shook. Not dramatically, a single low-frequency vibration, deep enough that he felt it more in his chest than in his feet. He recognized it immediately as the kind of vibration that would trigger the pier's structural sensors. He knew about the sensors because he's an engineer and he reads public infrastructure reports the way some people read the news. He stood up. He looked around. Nobody near him seemed alarmed. A few people looked confused, the way you do when you feel a tremor in California, that half-second pause where you check if it's going to get worse. It didn't get worse. But Tomas wasn't watching the people, he was watching the cameras. And this is where his account becomes the most important piece of testimony I have. Tomas told me that he could see 3 security cameras from where he was standing. One on a light pole near the bait shop, one on the roof of the Bubba Gump restaurant, one mounted on the support structure of the Pacific Wheel. All 3 were standard pan-tilt-zoom models. He identified the make and model from 50 feet away, because of course he did. He said all 3 cameras moved at the same time, not panning in a programmed sweep, not responding to a motion trigger. They moved together smoothly and stopped together, oriented south-southwest, toward the water. Tomas has worked with PTZ camera systems for 30 years. He told me that synchronized multi-camera reorientation like that requires either a central command, a human operator, or a software trigger sending a simultaneous instruction to all units, or a shared external stimulus strong enough to override individual camera programming. He said the second option is, in his experience, not a real thing. Cameras don't have a look at that reflex. They do what they're told by their control system, or they follow their programmed patrol path. They don't all decide to look at the same thing at the same time, unless the control system told them to. And that, he said, is what disturbed him more than what he saw in the water. Because if the Pier's camera control system, which is designed for security monitoring, crowd management, and ride safety, if that system issued a simultaneous redirect command to all 31 cameras, then the system had a reason. There was a trigger, something in the system's input, a sensor, an algorithm, a threshold being crossed, told every camera on the pier to look at the same point in the ocean at the same time. That means the system saw it, whatever it was. The system registered it as something that warranted a coordinated visual response. And here is what Tomas told me next, and here is where I need you to understand that Tomas Herrera is a calm, precise, deeply rational man who has spent 40 years working with automated systems and who does not use language carelessly. He said, "I've seen camera systems respond to fire, to structural failure, to crowd surges. I've seen systems respond to things they were designed to respond to. I've never seen a system respond to something it had no programmed reason to recognize. Those cameras moved because the system identified something, but there is nothing in a peer security system's programming that would include an ocean surface anomaly as a trigger event. That means either someone modified the system to look for that specific thing, or the system learned to look for it on its own. I asked him which he thought was more likely. He didn't answer for a long time. Then he said, "Neither of those should be likely. That's the problem." Tomas is the one who helped me understand the ride camera footage, not the security cameras. He has no more access to those than I do. But the ride cameras are a different system. They're operated by Pacific Park, not the city. And they're designed to capture rider photos for sale. They're on a simpler network. And Tomas, through contacts in the amusement ride industry, was able to determine that the Pacific Wheel camera system was manufactured by a company he'd worked with in the early 2000s. He knew the architecture. He knew that the photo capture system and the camera positioning system were on the same local network, but were supposed to be independently controlled. The positioning system handles the security cameras, and the photo system handles the ride cameras, and they don't talk to each other. But on October 14th, they did, what Tomas was able to show me. Through a technical analysis I don't fully understand, but which he walked me through twice. Is that the ride cameras, which are supposed to fire at fixed intervals based on ride position, fired out of sequence during the 2:06 to 2:09 window? They fired when the gondolas or cars were in positions that gave a clear sightline to the south-southwest ocean surface, not when riders were in the optimal photo position, when the ocean was in the optimal viewing position. The system took pictures of the water, using the riders as incidental foreground. That is what the 5 photos I have actually are. They're not ride photos that happen to have a weird ocean background. They're ocean photos that happen to have riders in the foreground. The cameras were repositioned subtly by fractions of degrees to prioritize whatever was happening in the water. And here I need to tell you something that I have confirmed with Tomas, and that he has confirmed with a former colleague who still works in ride system calibration. Those ride cameras have no network connection to the Pier's structural monitoring system. They have no environmental sensors. They have no programming that would cause them to adjust their aim based on ocean conditions. There is no documented, engineered reason for those cameras to have done what they did. Tomas used a word I keep coming back to. He said the system exhibited curiosity. He said it immediately after, and then corrected himself. Said it was anthropomorphizing. Said what he meant was that the system exhibited responsive behavior without a corresponding input trigger. But I watched his face when he said curiosity, and he meant it the first time. I want to talk about what the photos show, because I've described it in general terms, but I haven't been precise, and precision is the only thing I have. In the clearest of the 5 images, Glenn Mata's Pacific Wheel photo, taken at 2:08:03 p.m., according to the embedded timestamp. The ocean is visible in the background, occupying roughly the upper third of the frame. The lighting is flat, overcast sky, diffuse illumination, no harsh shadows, good conditions for seeing surface detail. In the water, approximately centered in the frame, there is a region roughly, and I'm estimating based on Tomas's distance calculations, 40 to 50 meters across, where the surface texture is different from the surrounding ocean. The surrounding water shows normal chop, small, irregular, wind-driven waves moving roughly west to east. Inside the anomalous region, the surface is not choppy. It's not calm either. It exhibits a pattern that I have spent a long time trying to describe accurately, and that I still don't think I've gotten right. The best I can do is this. It looks like the surface of the water is being pressed upward from below by something with a regular geometric structure, not pushed up. There's no mound, no swell. It's more like the water is being shaped, like it's conforming to something beneath it, the way a tablecloth conforms to whatever is underneath it. You can't see the object, but you can see the cloth responding to it. The shape the water is conforming to has radial symmetry, lines of surface tension, or what look like lines of surface tension, extend outward from a central point in a pattern that Tomas described as consistent with a 12-fold rotational symmetry, like a clock face. 12 lines, evenly spaced, radiating from a center, visible only because the water over each line is behaving slightly differently from the water between the lines. Between the lines, the water is nearly still. On the lines, it's moving, vibrating, almost in a way that catches the flat light and creates a subtle but visible contrast. In the other 4 photos, the same region is visible, but less clearly. 2 of the photos show it from a sharper angle, which compresses the apparent geometry. One shows it partially obscured by the pier structure. One shows it at the edge of the frame, barely there, but unmistakably present. The same radial pattern, the same membrane-like surface behavior, the same wrongness. I need to tell you about the drawing Lily made, because when I say it was a radial structure, I want you to understand what I mean. 12 lines, evenly spaced, radiating from a center point, drawn by a left hand that had never drawn anything more complex than a doodle in a notebook margin. Lily was on the pier. Lily was in line for the Pacific Wheel. Lily did not ride the Pacific Wheel because the evacuation started before her group boarded. Lily should not have seen what the ride cameras saw because she was at deck level, and the geometry would not have been visible from deck level at that distance. Lily drew it anyway. In November, I tried to get the security camera footage through a public records request. The city of Santa Monica denied it, citing an ongoing infrastructure assessment. I appealed. The appeal was denied on the grounds that the footage fell under a security exemption. I contacted the office of my city council representative. I was told the evacuation was a routine structural precaution and that no footage of the event existed in a format subject to public records law. I want to be clear, I don't think this is a conspiracy. I think this is a bureaucracy. I think the city of Santa Monica has security camera footage from October 14th that shows something in the water, and I think the people who have reviewed that footage don't know what it is, and I think the default institutional response to not knowing what something is to classify the footage and move on. I don't think anyone is hiding a sea monster. I think people are hiding their own confusion, which is what institutions do. But I think the cameras know something, and I think that's the part that should bother you. In December, Tomas called me. He'd been doing his own work, quietly, through his industry contacts. He'd been looking at the camera system's log files. Not the footage itself, but the metadata. The operational logs that record when a camera moves, what command triggered the movement, and what system state preceded it. He told me that the synchronized camera reorientation at 2:07:41 p.m., the same second as the POS void cluster, which I had told him about, was logged in the system as a manual override. That's the system's way of saying a human operator issued the command. But Tomas checked the staffing records for Pacific Park Security Office that day, which he obtained through a contact I won't identify. The security office was unstaffed at 2:07 p.m. The on-duty operator had stepped out at 1:55 for a bathroom break and didn't return until 2:12. No one was at the console. No one issued a manual override. But the system logged one anyway. I asked Tomas what that meant. He said, in a technical sense, it meant one of 3 things. Either the log was falsified after the fact, or there was a remote access event that the system classified as manual, or the system itself generated the command, and the only category it had for a self-generated action was manual override. He said the third option was not, strictly speaking, possible. He said a camera control system cannot generate an override of its own programming. That would require the system to evaluate its environment, determine that its current behavior was inadequate, and create a new instruction in real time. That's not what these systems do. They execute commands. They don't originate them. I said, but that's what happened. He said, that's what the log says happened. We sat with that for a while. I went back to the pier in January. I hadn't been since before the evacuation. I went alone on a Tuesday. At roughly the same time, Tomas usually goes. He wasn't there that day. I hadn't told him I was going. The pier felt normal. The rides were running. The crowds were light. The ocean was gray and choppy and behaved exactly like an ocean should. I walked to the end, to the bench near the bait shop, and I sat where Tomas sits, and I looked south, southwest, and I saw nothing. Just water, just waves, just the flat horizon line where the Pacific meets the sky. I sat there for 2 hours. Nothing happened. No vibration, no cameras moving, no anomaly in the water. I felt foolish. I felt like I'd been telling myself a story, assembling coincidences into a shape that felt meaningful because I needed Lily's silence and her drawing and her blank 11 hours to mean something other than a teenager having a bad day. And then, as I was getting up to leave, I looked down at my phone. I'd had it on the bench beside me, face down the whole time. When I picked it up, the camera app was open. I hadn't opened it. The phone's camera had been running, recording, not photographing. For the entire 2 hours, the footage was saved to my camera roll. 2 hours and 11 minutes of video, pointed at the deck planking and the gap between the boards. I watched the footage that night. Almost all of it is nothing. Boards, gaps, the occasional shadow of a seagull, the ambient sound of the pier, rides, voices, wind. But at the 1 hour and 47-minute mark, for a period of exactly 11 seconds, the light coming up through the gap between the boards changes. It doesn't dim, it doesn't brighten, it changes character. The daylight coming through the gap, reflected off the water below, briefly acquires a geometric regularity. Faint lines of light, evenly spaced, moving slowly across the underside of the boards. 12 lines. I have watched those 11 seconds more times than I can count. I have shown them to Tomas. I have shown them to Glenn. I have shown them to my friend who does photo forensics. Everyone agrees the footage is not manipulated. Everyone agrees the light pattern is real. No one can explain it. Tomas said it's consistent with light refracting through water that contains a structured interference pattern. Something below the surface, imposing order on the way light passes through it. He said, something under the pier is shaping the water, or something in the water is shaping itself, and it's there on days when nothing else happens. It's there when no one triggers an evacuation. It's there on a normal Tuesday. I need to tell you about one more thing, and then I'm going to tell you where I am now, and then I'm going to stop. In February, I received an email from an address I didn't recognize. The subject line was blank. The body contained a single hyperlink. I did not click on it. I'm not reckless. But I copied the URL and examined it. It pointed to a file hosted on a cloud storage service. The file name was a string of numbers that, when I looked at them for a while, I realized was a timestamp. 2024114_140741. October 14th, 2024, 2:07:41 p.m. I thought about it for 3 days. Then I opened it on a device with no personal data, on a network that wasn't mine. It was a video file, 19 seconds long. It showed a top-down view of the ocean's surface, clearly taken from a camera at significant height, looking straight down. A drone, probably, or a helicopter. The resolution was high. The water filled the entire frame. In the center of the frame, plainly visible, was the structure, not suggested by surface tension, not inferred from light patterns, visible, below the surface, dark against the lighter water, the way a shadow or a large object would appear from above. 12 radial arms extending from a central disk. The arms were not straight. They curved slightly, all in the same rotational direction, like a pinwheel. The central disc was featureless, the arms tapered. The whole structure was. And I asked Tomas to estimate this based on the water texture and wave scale. Between 60 and 80 meters in diameter. It was not moving. The water above it was behaving exactly as Tomas described, conforming to the shape below it, oscillating in place, not propagating outward. The video lasted 19 seconds. In the last 3 seconds, the structure dimmed, not sank, dimmed, as though it were losing opacity, as though it were becoming less present. And then the video ended. I don't know who sent it. The email address was a disposable account. The cloud storage link expired 24 hours after I accessed it. I downloaded the file. I still have it. Tomas has a copy. Glenn has a copy. My photo forensics friend has a copy. She examined the metadata and said the file had been stripped of all device information, but that the video compression was consistent with a DJ-1 commercial drone camera. Someone was flying a drone over that exact spot at 2:07 p.m. on October 14th. Someone captured what was under the water, and someone sent it to me. To me specifically, which means someone knows what I've been doing. 5 months later, without explanation. I don't know what the structure is. I want to say that clearly. I don't know if it's biological. I don't know if it's geological. I don't know if it's artificial. I don't know if it's always there or if it comes and goes. I don't know if October 14th was special or if it was simply the day when the structure was close enough to the surface or active enough or present enough to affect the pier's systems and the people on it. I don't know why Lily drew it, and I don't know how she knew what it looked like when she was at deck level and couldn't have seen it from above. I don't know why she drew it with her left hand. I don't know why she doesn't remember. I don't know why the cameras moved. I don't know how a POS system and a camera control system and a structural vibration sensor array all responded to the same event in the same second when they share no common network, no common programming, and no common sensor input. I don't know what signal reached all of them simultaneously. I don't know if signal is even the right word. I don't know who sent me the drone footage. I don't know if they're a scientist, a hobbyist, a government employee, or someone else entirely. I don't know if they sent it as a warning or a gift or a test. But here's what I do know, and this is where I'll leave you. Last Tuesday, 4 days ago, I went back to the pier, same bench, same time. I brought my phone, and this time I opened the camera app deliberately. I pointed it at the gap in the boards. I watched the screen. Normal light, normal water, normal Tuesday. After about 40 minutes, a man sat down next to me, older, maybe 70s, windbreaker, baseball cap, no particular distinguishing features. He didn't look at me. He looked at the water. We sat in silence for about 10 minutes. Then he said, without turning his head, "You're the sister." I didn't respond. He said, "She drew it, didn't she?" I still didn't respond. My hand was shaking. I was holding my phone very tightly. He said, "It's been here longer than the pier, longer than the city. It sleeps and it wakes up, and when it wakes up, it looks around. That's all the cameras were. That's all any of it was. It was looking around, and some people, when it looks, they see it back." He stood up. He buttoned his windbreaker. He said, "Your sister saw it back. That's what the drawing is. It's not what she saw. It's what saw her." He walked away. I watched him go. He walked east along the pier, past the restaurant, past the arcade, and into the parking lot, and I never saw his face clearly, and I did not follow him. I sat on that bench for another hour. The light through the board stayed normal. My phone did not open any apps on its own. The cameras on their poles followed their standard patrol patterns. The ocean was an ocean. But I've been thinking about what he said, not the mystical part. I don't know what to do with, it sleeps and it wakes up. That could be anything. That could be a man who sits on that bench every Tuesday and has constructed a mythology around something he doesn't understand, just like I'm in danger of doing. What I've been thinking about is the cameras. If the structure, whatever it is a thing that periodically becomes active, and if that activation produces some kind of measurable signal, then it is possible that the Pier's overlapping electronic systems have, over years of exposure, developed a response to that signal, not because they were programmed to, but because the signal is strong enough, or regular enough, or fundamental enough, that it bleeds into systems the way a powerful radio transmission can bleed into an unshielded speaker. The cameras didn't decide to look. They were pushed to look. The POS systems didn't decide to void transactions. They were disrupted. The vibration sensors didn't detect structural instability. They detected the vibration of the thing in the water and interpreted it as the only thing they know how to interpret, a threat to the pier. Every system on the pier responded to the same event. Each one responded in the only language it had. The security cameras turned. The ride cameras fired. The cash registers flinched. The vibration sensors screamed. None of them understood what they were detecting. All of them detected it. And 5 people out of 1,100, 6 if you count Lily, saw it too. I don't know what that makes me. I didn't see it. I wasn't there that day. I've looked at the photos and the footage and the drawing, and I've sat on that bench for hours, and I've never once seen the water do anything it shouldn't. Whatever frequency some people receive it on, I'm not tuned to it. But my phone is. My phone opened its own camera and recorded 2 hours of footage I didn't ask for. And in that footage, for 11 seconds, the light between the boards showed me what's under the pier. I think about that a lot. I think about the fact that the machines can see it and I can't. I think about what it means that every electronic system on the pier is a better witness than I am. I think about Lily drawing with her left hand, looking at me instead of the paper, reproducing a shape she should never have seen from a vantage point she never occupied. And I think about whether what happened to her is closer to what happened to the cameras or what happened to me. I think she received a signal, like the cameras, like the cash registers, like the vibration sensors. I think the thing in the water looked around, and when it looked, it transmitted something, and most people are not equipped to receive it. But some people are, and some machines are. And my sister is 17 years old, and she received a transmission from something in the ocean that is older than the city it lives next to, and the only output device she had was a pencil and her left hand. I don't know what to do with that. I go to the pier every Tuesday now. I sit on the bench. I watch the water. I hold my phone with the camera pointed down through the gap in the boards. Nothing has happened since January. The light is always normal. The water is always normal. The cameras followed their patrol paths, and the rides take their photos, and the cash registers process their transactions, and everything works the way it's supposed to work. But I keep going. Not because I think I'll see it. I've accepted that I probably won't. I keep going because every Tuesday I check, and every Tuesday the systems are calm, and that means it's still asleep. And I'm not equipped to know what it looks like when it wakes up. But the 31 cameras are